Thank you guys for joining us today. Here at America's Credit Museum, where it all started for the credit system, so a very special place for us in the credit world. Elder financial abuse. Last year, New Hampshire Credit Union started a program to educate their frontline staff on elder financial abuse, what to look for, how to help, how to assist people. And unfortunately, we see it as a growing problem. You know, we see it a lot in our branches, people coming in, and you can tell something might not be right with the transaction with the elder member. So, you know, credit unions work to do the best they can to alleviate that. Now, you guys work this on a day-to-day basis. Can you tell me a little bit about first what your unit does for elders here in New Hampshire?
Sure. So Sonny and I make up the Elder Abuse and Financial Exploitation Unit at the New Hampshire Attorney General's Office. We've been in existence for 2 years now, and we were tasked with identifying and investigating the most serious cases of elder financial exploitation, elder neglect, elder abuse, and investigating them and prosecuting them to hopefully bring some of the perpetrators of these terrible crimes to justice.
Right.
So I'm the prosecutor in the unit. Sonny is the victim advocate, so she provides outreach and resources to victims throughout the process. It can be a very difficult and trying process, especially when you're elderly. So Sonny serves as, you know, a focus point for them and a resource for them if they have questions or if they need support throughout the trial process.
Sure. So it started 2 years ago. So obviously somebody saw a problem here in the state. Can you tell me maybe about the scope of how big of a problem this is here in New Hampshire?
Well, I think it's probably correct to say that somebody saw a problem. I don't think they saw the whole scope of the problem.
Right.
It's been a problem for a long time, and it's getting worse and worse by the day simply because we're becoming an older and older state. And as there's people becoming older, there's more money available, and there's more opportunities for people to take advantage of that.
Right. And I know every situation is so unique, but can you give me sort of general signs, general things that you would see to know that there's a problem, or general scenarios that are kind of common?
Sure. Well, elderly people usually have worked very hard to be comfortable once they've retired, and usually are able to live on a fixed income with very, sensible purchases to ensure that they're going to have enough money to get them through the rest of their lives.
Right.
So the number one sign that there's a problem is unexpected or unreasonable withdrawals, spending, checks, transfers. I mean, there really are no reasons why somebody who's retired and has worked their whole life to have a nest egg that they can live off would suddenly be withdrawing $20,000, would suddenly be opening a second bank account and transferring $50,000 into that bank account, would suddenly be coming with a new friend to the bank over and over again and making withdrawals with that person looking over their shoulder. So those are some of the most common warning signs that we see.
Right, so a lot of that's on the front line of financial institutions. So do you learn about this from financial institutions?
Sometimes.
Sometimes, okay. And what is the burden for a financial institution? They suspect elder financial abuse. What should they be doing here in New Hampshire?
Well, they, along with everybody else in the state of New Hampshire, are what's called mandatory reporters under the laws of New Hampshire. So anybody that has a good faith basis for believing that an elderly person is being exploited, neglected, or abused has an obligation to immediately report that to the Bureau of Elder and Adult Services.
Sure. Okay. So that is the law here in the state.
It is.
Great. Okay, great. So Sonny, tell me, you're the victim advocate, so you must work with the victims on a one-on-one basis. I'm sure the family members, whoever else is involved. We hear often that oftentimes a family member is a perpetrator of elder financial abuse. Does that make that very difficult sometimes to work with the victim to try to find a way to alleviate things?
It absolutely makes it very difficult, and but we do reach out to the victim themselves. But when they suddenly realize that this is a crime and that this is their family member, there's a lot of emotions happen. Sometimes it's sheer shame and embarrassment that this has happened, that their family member did this, that they let it happen.
Sure.
But and they also feel like they're alone.
Right.
That they can't tell anybody this.
Right.
There's often threats from the family member is saying, that they'll put them in a nursing home.
Right.
You can't take care of yourself. If nobody's going to believe you, you've got dementia. There's just all of this language that goes at this elder person. And so there's just this combination of emotions and the embarrassment and shame and not knowing how to reach out, not knowing how to get the resources. And then there's the times where there might be one person in the family who's been financially exploiting the elder person, but the rest of the family catch on, and so they provide the support system. There's a myriad of circumstances that can happen in these cases.
Right, and unfortunately elders, they often have medical issues. You mentioned dementia. And if you're dealing with that, where somebody's maybe not have all their faculties, is that I can imagine it must be harder to try to figure out a way to move forward with prosecution or just assist that person.
It can make it difficult, but I mean, we've worked with people who have Alzheimer's or dementia.
Yeah.
We have worked with them, and we have to be cognizant. We have to know when it's the best time to speak to them is. If they have a guardian appointed to them, we'll work directly with the guardian. So there's ways to work around that, but it does make it difficult. And these cases take a long time to come
Sure.
to fruition. And it might be a year from when we indict it down to prosecution of it. And so it makes it difficult because there can be deterioration in that year.
Right. So we're working to educate our Credians, and eventually we want to educate consumers with our program as well. Education is often a solution to so many problems we have. What would the education effort be here? What do you think elders should know, or even before they become elders? What are good things to think about to prevent as best you can?
They should know that, one, they're not alone. This is
Right.
rampant in our state, unfortunately. And for those around them, look for those telltale signs. If they used to always go out for coffee with their friends and suddenly they can't afford a cup of coffee,
Yeah.
well, why did that happen?
Right.
If you used to go to their house and there was always sufficient food and suddenly there's just not sufficient food in the fridge anymore, or they're suddenly beginning to look quite bedraggled, or they're not communicating as well.
Right.
There's always someone there looking over their shoulder. There's things like that, and we encourage the elderly, we encourage their friends, their neighbors, their families. If you suspect it, you report. Let the professionals handle it, because
Right.
it's just happening too much.
Right. So what are some of the services your unit offers to somebody who's been hit with elder financial abuse? Are there particular services that you offer? Is it?
Well, we're not really a service unit.
Right.
We prosecute crime. So if somebody
Sure.
has been the victim of a crime, Sunny would be a resource for them. What we
Right.
do is really investigate, whether a crime has been committed, and
Sure.
then build that case,
Right.
seek criminal charges and prosecute it. And if a prosecution is initiated, then Sunny would be an advocate for the victim of that crime. Do you want to talk about what some of the services you could offer to a
Right.
victim?
So under the Victims' Bill of Rights, every victim is entitled to know what's going on and to have a voice in the process. So from when we choose to indict, from that point forward, I'm working with the victims, telling them what's going on, keeping them updated and letting them know how we're proceeding. I also might make a referral I might call the Bureau of Elder and Adult Services and see if there's services that could be provided to this elder person. If in our conversations we realize that there's things they're lacking that they could possibly use help with. So we also do that part of it where we will refer them out to services, so to speak.
Sure.
Or to the agencies, things like the Bureau of Elder and Adult Services. Service Link.
Right.
211 is a phone number they can call that will tell them where they can receive all these different services or address different issues they may have. So we may just connect them to those services.
Right. And I think about, scenarios with elders. So a lot of them have home health aides or somebody who comes in and helps. Are those folks educated on that? Is there an effort to make sure those home health care companies understand the challenges here?
We certainly have made an effort, and
Right.
hopefully those individual companies are also making an effort. But Sunny and I have made an effort to speak with really any professional that has an opportunity in their professional capacity to interact with elderly people and to be on the front line of hopefully realizing that there's a problem,
Sure.
identifying it, and knowing that they have an obligation to make a report to the Bureau of Elder and Adult Services.
Right. So ultimately, you want to prosecute and bring charges, and that can act as a deterrent, for others. Tell me a little bit about that. I'm sure you could talk about it for a long time, but is it a hard case? Is it hard to prosecute elder financial abuse?
In most cases, it's very difficult to prosecute. Unlike, we'll use general theft as a comparable crime. If somebody steals something from someone, it's fairly easy to prosecute. You
Sure.
call the person as a witness. You would ask them, did you own this piece of property? Yes, I did. And what happened to it? Well, somebody stole it. And do you know who? Yes, it was that person right there sitting at the defendant's
Right.
table.
Right.
And it's easy. With an elderly person, oftentimes they don't know what's happening. Even if they do know what's happening, they don't realize that they're being scammed. They don't realize that they're being taken advantage of.
Sure.
They often have severe cognitive deficiencies, whether it's due to dementia, Alzheimer's, or simply just because they are at an age where they don't really understand what's happening.
Right.
And the ability to articulate that
Sure.
and explain to us, or ultimately to a jury, exactly what happened and who did it is very difficult for them. And
Right.
unfortunately, the steepest challenge we face is honestly, when we get to trial, a lot of these victims aren't alive anymore. And
Right.
at that point, how do you prove a case when there's nobody there to say what
Sure.
happened? It's not impossible.
Right.
We have been successful in doing it, and continue to try to bring forward charges even
Right.
when we don't have a victim to testify. But it is exceptionally difficult, more so than
Sure.
honestly any other case that I've ever tried to prosecute.
Right. So if someone's prosecuted for elder financial abuse, you mentioned theft, and theft, you get your sentence is based on amount and things like that. Does elder financial abuse carry a different set of punishments based on the amount, based on, is there special punishments for elder abuse?
There can be, depending on the circumstances. When we sentence people, it's never just based on the amount. You try to look at the total circumstances.
Sure.
Does the person have a criminal record? Is this person intentionally taking advantage of somebody who is extremely vulnerable? How much money was taken? What kind of hardship did it create for the person who lost the money? Things like that. Also, whether the person was suffering from a drug addiction or had some desperation that pushed them to steal, or whether the person was just greedy and doing it because they saw it for the taking. The general penalties that come along with elder exploitation are the same as theft, but there is a sentencing enhancement if you can prove that the person was 65 years or older and that the person that stole from them was intentionally taking advantage of their age or physical or mental condition that made them exceptionally vulnerable.
Right, okay. I imagine this is a problem. Somebody who reports elder financial abuse may be concerned about, confidentiality, or how will they be brought into the case. What would you say to somebody who maybe be hesitant to report because they don't want to, be brought into a situation where they have to testify? Or, will you take just tips, or does somebody really have to?
People can report anonymously.
Anonymously, okay. And do you find that a lot, or not necessarily?
I would say there's just as many anonymous reporters as there are people that are willing to give their name. Most people are very willing to help.
Right.
The fear of being dragged into something is not something we often see unless there's perhaps a relationship with the culprit. In
Sure.
that case, an anonymous report probably makes sense. But
Right.
Whatever the individual situation is, they're mandated to report, so it shouldn't be a should I or shouldn't I.
Right.
They have to. It's actually a misdemeanor offense not to.
Not to.
But the Bureau of Elder and Adult Services will allow people to make an anonymous report if, for whatever reason, they don't want to give
Sure,
their information.
that's great. So give me some examples of some elder fraud that you see. Is it somebody calling the elder? Is it email? What are some of the common ones you see?
We see, obviously we hear a lot about the scams.
Yep.
That's, the romance scams, the lottery scams on the phone, the mail scams, the Jamaican lottery scams. We see all
Right.
of those, and we see a lot of it. The IRS scam right now,
Sure.
because of the tax season, had become very prevalent for a while there.
Right.
But we see constant scams being happening. But we also see the more local, where it's a family member
Right.
scamming their own parent or a grandparent or an aunt or just a family member. So we see all varieties.
Right. Yeah, I know credit unions will sometimes hear stories where, the credit union recognizes somebody comes into the branch with somebody they may typically not come in with, or maybe it is a family member, it's a large withdrawal, so immediately, it's a red flag. And, the other ones of somebody from another country saying they need to wire money, and, you think that somebody wouldn't fall victim to that, but it is, I think they're susceptible because of their circumstances.
Well, what we say to the elderly when we speak to them, and we do go around the state talking about this, what we talk to them about is that these folks who are manipulative. They are master manipulators.
Yes.
Their job is to get money out of people, and with no conscience whatsoever.
Right.
And the other part about that is that people don't talk enough about it. We ask them, if you've been scammed, tell your neighbors, tell your friends, because that's how they're going to know.
Right.
You may save someone else by talking about it, but we see just a tremendous amount, and these folks are very good at what they do.
Right.
They really get on the heartstrings of these folks. They learn little pieces about them so the person thinks they have a personal connection to them.
Sure.
And then they manipulate them. I've spoken to people who have gotten as many as 22 calls in a morning from someone who's trying to scam them. They're relentless, and it's horrible.
Right, absolutely. And it's an aging country, aging population, but specifically here in New Hampshire, we are, a lot of elder population. Can you put any kind of number, any idea how many people or any kind of number on fraud amount, or is that hard to quantify?
I think it's very difficult.
Very
to quantify.
difficult, right? Yeah.
Well, we believe only about 1 in 14 get reported.
Yeah.
So starting there,
Right.
how do we quantify? It's underreported because of the shame and the embarrassment that people experience, and that's what we try and emphasize. Please, don't be ashamed, don't be embarrassed. You're in great company. Tell somebody. Pick up the phone and tell.
Right, absolutely. So it's counseling. They need counseling to understand that that's not to be embarrassed. It's a problem for many, many people. So.
Well, and your folks on the front line are sort of key.
Yes.
Because they see it first.
That's right.
And they may be the ones that can sort of advise folks that, this just doesn't seem right. Can we sit down and talk? And
Right.
specifically with credit unions, where it usually addresses neighborhoods
Yeah,
and people
sure.
they know and see regularly, and suddenly the behavior is different.
Right.
The withdrawals are different, so they see all those telltale signs.
Right. And so our credit unions can call you anytime and report and go through that process. Any resources? Where would somebody go to get more information about what you folks do?
The Attorney General has, there's a website that, the Attorney General's
Sure.
website has all the different units that are there. So it's easy to find it there. There's also things like New Hampshire Legal Assistance has assistance for the elderly on civil matters. So that's a resource. The Bureau of Elder and Adult Services is a resource that they're the first place where reports should go.
Right.
And the local police
Local
are a
police,
great
sure.
resource.
Sure. Great. Well, credit unions, this is why we've stepped up in this area. We're very proud of our credit union senior safeguard program, and more proud of the fact that the credit unions have really adopted it and are educating all their folks. So later this month, we're going to make it available to the general public, a consumer portion of it that's going to educate folks on elder financial abuse. So
Great.
we're always happy to work with you guys in any way.
Well, we
And
love
really
to get the
appreciate
word
what
out.
you're doing. Yes. So thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you
Really
very much.
Thank you
appreciate
for
it.
having
Thank
us.
you guys.